The biggest misconception is that people think that HR is supposed to be their friend. We're not. Yeah, HR isn't your friend, and I don't know why people would want that. You don't say that finance or marketing or sales is your friend. Why do I need to be your friend? Even the concept of saying that your employees are your family is the biggest cringe moment I have, because they're not. Like, what is wrong with saying they're a team? What's wrong with team? Why? I'm not your family. People have dysfunctional families, including myself. I say, tell me who are the exceptions to the rules, and I can tell you what the culture is. My stance is that if DE&I is separate from everything else in the business, if it was not embedded into everything that you're doing, and I mean everything, then it was never going to work. Also, if money was not involved in holding people accountable, it was never going to work. Yeah, so I have self-proclaimed myself as the quit queen. I've hopped to the top. Like, everywhere I've gone, I've moved up. If something is not serving me, I will quit. Your work is not your worth. You are so much more than your job. You're more than your job.
Hello and welcome to Leaders in Learning. I'm Shauna David, and my guest today in the beautiful Seattle is Jessica Winder. She's the CEO and co-founder of Hidden Gem Career Coaching. She's also an author, champion of job seekers from underrepresented groups, and the proud mom of twins. She's on a mission to empower individuals and organizations to unlock their true potential and embrace their authenticity. In this episode, we're tapping into Jessica's expertise in talent and HR operations to explore how to build the HR the world needs to support the future of work. So let's get started. How are you, Jessica?
I am doing well. I'm so happy to be here.
It's very exciting to be able to unpack all things people, talent, HR ops related on our episode of Leaders in Learning today. And I want to start with a bit about your background in technical education. You've spent a ton of time learning about what makes strong, healthy organizational cultures. I gotta ask, is academia losing its edge? Like, where is the gap between educational institutions, the skill gap we have today? Help me understand how we got where we are.
So I started laughing because my answer is absolutely yes. And I say that with my background. I have teachers in my family, like I have professors in my family. And so I think very highly of education, but there's absolutely a gap. There's no doubt about it. And to me, the gap is that you go to college to learn about the world, about people that are different from you, around studying things that maybe you know nothing about. Like, it's to open your mind frame. I could absolutely do my job as a senior vice president of HR without my degree. In fact, my degree was in biology. I wanted to go to medical school. So it had nothing to do with business. When I started in business, I literally had no concept of what HR was, because I didn't want to work in business. And so I think that there's a divide and a lack of willingness to train. So I believe that there should be on-the-job training. And obviously in other countries, that is more looked upon as something positive. Whereas here, it's you better go to school, you better know what you want to do at 18. And that's not really realistic.
No. It's not. At 18 years old, you're supposed to be able to figure out your future and invest a big, significant, hefty amount of money to make that happen.
Yes, that you will pay off for the rest of your life.
Right. But then right now, the biggest barrier to businesses, C-suites are saying, is that there's critical talent shortages. They cannot find people with the skills that they need, yet there are thousands, millions of people graduating around the world every day. And so there is something broken. Yes. When you think about your personal experience, how did you bridge that gap? Like, what types of things did you do in your day in, day out to be able to build the credibility, the context that you need to be a senior vice president of HR?
I had a mentor. I had a mentor who really believed in me and who thought everything that she knew she could just teach me, and that I didn't need to go back to school to learn it, that I spent 3 years with her, and she called me Little Duckling because I would follow her around. I literally would follow her around to all of her meetings, and she taught me everything I needed to know. So when I think about HR, you can be a generalist. So she taught me everything. So from payroll to benefits to learning how to hire and fire someone, recruitment, she laid it all out for me. And there is a lack of, nowadays, you must have at least 3 to 5 years of experience. I look at job descriptions all the time.
Right.
And it's like, what about those people that don't have that? So they just find something in between, or they have to know someone. And so there's a gap there. And the gap for me was someone who was willing to teach.
An individual that made all the difference in sharing, paying it forward. Mm-hmm. So, when we talk about the education institutions, and I agree, nothing but love for educators. There is nothing more important than teachers and people doing the good work to expand the minds of young and old. But they live within these institutions. And when you think about different crafts in the world, software engineering, politician, economics, much of these programs, they get updated curriculum. If you go into a software engineering program today, you're not working on Turing. Like you are working in modern technology, but I do not think that's the case for many HR programs. Most of them don't have a DEI component. Most of them, behavioral change management, learning and development, these are afterthoughts. So it's really not about performance optimization. It's about legal defensibility. So how do we fix that? Because business leaders are looking to their HR folks to solve these talent problems. Any advice for a talent practitioner who's feels scared because the education that they rely on is not actually the same thing that they need to be delivering in their business? What can they do to help close that gap?
You just hit me in the heart, because anytime someone mentions HR and mentions legal in the same sentence, I am so resistant. Now, mind you, I'm married to an attorney, so like I'm all about the law, but HR is not legal. And a lot of times that's how it's seen. It's seen as very much compliance and risk management instead of you have creative thought and you can think about employee experience or employer branding. So there's a gap in between what most CEOs think that you should be doing and what, most HR practitioners actually want to do. And some of that, I think, is just a lack of us using the right terminology. So I will put that on my own self and my peers. Of a lot of times we talk in I feel this way, or this is what I've heard, but I can't tell you who said it, instead of like facts and data. And so one of the things that has helped me in my career is just saying, this is the data, and then I'm going to tell you how or who I've talked to and give you the feel side of it. But when you lead with that, you lose credibility.
There's something about that feeling and kind of the structure within organizations around gender roles, for lack of a better way of saying it. Like you will typically see a more woman-dominant workforce in an HR function, in office of the president function, culture role,
Marketing, yeah.
right. And so how can folks feeling like they're in that space, you mentioned data, you mentioned terminology. One other thing that I have found to be successful, and I'm curious if you have any stories from your career that you can share about this, is actually like going to the work, really deeply understanding it, and then using that terminology back in the way that you explain the value. I know that you've worked in many different diverse industries, from like traditional oil and gas to like high moving tech companies. Anything in that diverse experience that you can share as advice for a practitioner trying to like get close and real with the business?
Yes, you have to understand the business. And to your point, there is I call it like a mommy daddy complex. Like normally the CEO is a guy, so that's the dad. And then mom comes in and is the HR person that's here to tell you, no, don't do this. And I hate everything about that. So I think the dynamic of that is baked into the cake. And so you have to be mindful of what you're doing. So for what I've done before, when I used to live in Chicago, I actually worked for a crime scene cleanup company, the biggest crime scene cleanup company in the world.
Very interesting.
And my second week there, I was like, okay, so I need to understand, like, what are these technicians doing? What are they out in the field doing? So I went to the crime scenes. I was like, I'll go with you guys. As we know, a lot of crimes are committed at night, so our technicians worked at night. So I was like, I'm going to come hang out with you guys and see what you do. Now, I will say I don't have the stomach to go in, so I did not go in where they needed to clean up. But I was there, and I got to see, like, what is it like to be on a crime scene once the police are done and they need to do their job. And I gained so much respect, because when I started there, they said no one in HR has ever come out here. And I was like, well, I don't have the stomach to go in there, but I'll come and sit with you in the truck, and like just talk to you about your experience. And I've done that with every job I've ever gone to. So I was HR in retail before I went and worked in the retail store for like 2 weeks, because how do I understand what you're going through, or how are you going to respect me if you think you don't even know what you're talking about?
There's this trust element
Yes.
that it seems like you were able to build trust with the people that you were serving, both like the leaders and the humans in the workforce. When I think about the employee experience of today, you talked about how like HR folks really are influential in creating the employee experience, but often it's rooted in feelings and like happy donut day versus like meaningful culture. So how do HR folks actually build culture? I don't think it's the like stickers and like fancy
The pizza party.
No, that's not it. What is culture? How do you build it as a team?
Nobody wants another pizza party. They want their money. So To your point earlier about you have to get the respect of employees, but also the respect of leadership. And those are two very different things.
Yeah.
So for me, when I'm thinking about how do I gain the trust of the employees, they need to know that I understand what they're going through. So whether I'm going to go sit with them, I'm going to listen to what they actually, their day-to-day is like. And then with the leadership team, it's, do I understand the business aspect? How are we actually making money? And those things need to coincide. Like, how are employees feeling and how are we actually making money? And then how can I be the go-between between those two? And if you have one or the other, and I've been in both situations where the leadership team trusted me, the employees hated me, or the employees absolutely adored me, and the leadership team was like, oh, you spend too much time with them. Like, you need to be over here with us.
Which creates a little bit of suspicion.
Yes, exactly.
Which is an interesting dichotomy.
So you have to get it right. And it's hard. It takes a lot of time.
One of the words I've been hearing recently to help encapsulate this is lifetime employee value.
Yes.
And I think that's a beautiful representation when you think about the experience of a software engineer and you want to articulate to the business leaders, being able to say, we can maximize the lifetime value of this employee will make us this amount of money. And that's a very lovely notion, especially in the before times when people would have very long careers. But that's not the reality anymore. And I've heard and listened to you talk very positively about this notion of job hopping.
Yeah.
Tell me about what it is. Tell me about why you think it's powerful in today's kind of employee-employer context.
Yeah, so I have self-proclaimed myself as the quit queen. Okay. And I said the quit queen. So if something is not serving me, I will quit. And I think that is the way a true leader knows when to leave and when to I'm going to keep going, I'm going to push through. And so I have had several jobs where I knew instantly, this is not for me. I am not the right person to solve this problem. So I quit. And I went to another job. And if you were to ask my father worked at the same job for 30 years. He would say, I am the epitome of a job hopper. And my stance is, well, I've hopped to the top. Everywhere I've gone, I've moved up. And so it's been very strategic. And I don't think that you have to be somewhere for, 5-10 years to make an impact. I know this is very resistant to some people. They're like, absolutely not. You need to stop telling people this. I've had that pushback on LinkedIn.
What's their pushback?
Their pushback is that unless someone has been there at least 2 years, you're not getting your return on your investment, which I don't believe that's true. I don't. I think that in certain instances, if someone coming in and making a true impact, whatever that bottom line is, it could be an engineer, they're fixing the code. It could be someone in HR. What have they done about the employee experience? There is something you're getting out of them. Someone works somewhere for 2 years and you got nothing out of it, that's not realistic unless they were an underperformer.
So the argument is that the return on investment isn't fair to the employer because they're not actually getting any of the value. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I don't agree.
Right, because there's clearly something wrong with your onboarding program, your leaders, if they're not able to set someone up to deliver value. That's a very interesting concept. When I think about the potential downside of job hopping, I think about the long-term impact to an organizational culture. And from that perspective, I can see how there could be some risk there. Do you think there's any downside from a long-term culture perspective when you have a huge amount of people, especially the high performers, quickly leave the organization?
Absolutely. So that you're losing historical context. But my kind of pushback to that is you should give me a reason to stay. So if you want me to stay, then you need to, how are you investing in me? How have you told me that you want to promote me or this is where you see me in the future? And if not, the person's going to find a way to get to where they want to be. So in my career, I have never left it up to a leader, to an organization to tell me what's next. I have always said, this is my job for right now. My next step is XYZ, whether it's here or somewhere else, that's where I'm going next. So if you believe in me and you want me to stay, then that's where I'm going.
Jessica, how do you have the courage to say that to somebody? You just started at a new job.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a very bold person too. I think some people love it, some people hate it. But part of the reason that I'm bold is because I know I've seen time and time again from an HR standpoint where someone will say, once I do a great job, they're going to recognize me. And I'm like, no. I've been in those meetings. Your name has never been mentioned. Yeah. And so I think I've seen behind the curtain enough. That's what it is.
You've got the Wizard of Oz perspective. And I've been lucky to spend part of my career in the business and in HR. Mm-hmm. And you are right that there's a secret thing happening that's difficult for employers to understand. And I think over the last several years, we've seen this power dynamic where employers are looking for more transparency and there was a period where employers are giving that. It feels like the pendulum is shifting.
Oh, yes.
Do you think it'll stay? Where do you think the pendulum's going to end up?
I absolutely think it's going to keep going back and forth because people don't like to give up power. So if you get power and I feel like you took it from me, I'm going to do everything I can to get it back. So that's what's going on right now with employers. They feel like the pandemic, things changed. You know, we are in a TikTok culture where everyone has a microphone, and if they don't like something, they're going to record it and blast you on the internet. And so they're taking that power back. And a lot of turnover that happened in 2020, employers felt like, well, I have to pay all these amounts of money to keep you. So now we're going back to, I'm going to take that power back. So it's always going to be a struggle.
It's going to be back and forth. Well, and I find that too, the what an employee, so there was a long time where like swag, a water bottle, a notepad, like that will keep people, that was perceived as the cultural thing that will keep people engaged and loyal. But what the research and the data is actually showing us is that employees who do not have a lateral move or a promotion within their first 18 months to 2 years are almost 60% more likely to leave their roles. And so there is an opportunity cost, maybe the opposite of what you originally were getting rebutted against.
Yeah.
So when I think about your personal experience, one of the things that I think is really cool is how you took your experience and you wrote it down for others to benefit from. You are the author of a book called Hidden Gems. Tell me a little bit about what that book is all about and why you chose to write it.
I chose to write the book because I myself have had some great coaches throughout my career that have really helped me and taken me to the next level. And a lot of people cannot afford that. I grew up in a community that was very poor. And so my experience as a first generation, corporate employee, first generation college student, a lot of times I just didn't have knowledge that I felt like other people had the upper hand because I had no one in my life that could give me guidance. I just had to figure it out or be willing to ask somebody. And so I think that's also where the boldness comes in, is that I've always had to kind of just put myself out there and be vulnerable because I had no one in my immediate circle that could help me. And so I wrote the book because I thought if you can't afford coaching, you can afford this $20 book to teach you what is it you want in your career. And within the stories, I talk about my lived experience. So what is it like to be a Black woman in a leadership role where maybe you're the only person in the whole company that looks like you? So I talked about my lived experience, but also how do you move forward in your career?
It is not an easy thing to do, to be the person going through it and then live the experience, relish it enough to articulate it forward. But I recognize how powerful that is. We talk a lot in the last several years about how financial education, how to grow your own food, how to do your taxes. These are all skills that you don't, depending on where you come from, you won't have. So I appreciate that it is a different world in the corporate world. So going back to school for a couple of minutes, isn't school supposed to help you, prepare you? When you go to university, there's an implicit agreement that you're going to get educated on how to navigate these things. But it sounds like there was a bunch of stuff that didn't really get exposed through your experience.
Yeah, so when I think about education, I absolutely think that me going to college opened doors that would not have been open to me because of my situation. Now, I say that in comparison to I have a very close friend who did not go to college and just had a very different living experience than I did growing up, and she is in the same spot I'm in right now. She's a senior vice president just like me. But like I said, where I had to be vulnerable and ask questions, she didn't have to do those things because she was set up and she had things that I didn't have. So I think about it right now. I have twins. Do I want them to go to college? Absolutely. But my husband and I have had this conversation because when I think about them going to college or them being like an artist, to me, I would say I want them to be an artist because to me that sounds like a privilege. Like I didn't have that. I knew you must go to college, you must do these things or you're not going to make it out of this situation. Whereas for my daughters, I'm like, I'm going to set you up to win. You want to go be an artist? Be an artist, but I see that as a privilege. So it's totally a mental thing.
You frame that in a very interesting way. It sounds like we come from similar backgrounds, and education was the key. And that was something, my mom was a single mom, new to Canada, barely spoke English, and went to get her Canadian securities, basically a financial course, and taught me bear and bull market when I was 8 years old because she couldn't read English. And so I would teach her the glossary, and that dedication to education being the thing that can take you somewhere else is true. I agree with you. And I recognize that we've talked a lot about archaic institutions and how they can be a bit slow to catch up. But the fundamental habit that I hear you saying made a difference in your life, and I know it's been true for me, is the ability to learn.
Yes.
And so let's talk about the ability to learn a bit more and the role of HR professionals in making sure that employees are learning the right thing at the right time. Is it their responsibility?
It is, but it's also everyone's responsibility. That's in leadership. So a lot of times we get into the like, HR said, I've even had leaders say, Jessica told me to tell you that you need to work on this skill, or you need to be better at like project management or change management. That's wrong. And I always ask those leaders, why are you giving me your power? Why are you saying that I said something, which how would I know unless you told me? And so I think it's all, if you are in leadership, someone's development along with them, I want to be clear, it's also their responsibility, but you as their leader should be actively helping them.
So it's not HR's job to provide the coaching, feedback, and learning. You're saying that leaders play a critical role in making that happen.
Absolutely. I think it's HR's job to lay the foundation and maybe to make the frameworks, but to actually deliver it, no.
So how do we make sure leaders do that? What's your opinion on leadership development? There's like $3 billion a year that gets spent on leadership development.
And we are not seeing the fruit of that labor.
It's true.
Yeah. Like it's so much money is put into it. And I myself have gone through trainings that I thought were extremely impactful, and others that I thought, why did we spend this money? This was a complete waste of time. I could have just YouTube University this information. It's very, very important. But part of the problem is that what leaders think that employees need and what employees actually want to learn, a lot of times there's a gap there. So I have asked employees, like, what is it you want to learn about? And they would say project management, change management. Like, I want to understand these things that could also help me in my personal life. You go ask the leadership team and they're like, we're going to do a session on communication skills. And we're like, that's not project management. Like, those are two very different things. And so there's just a disconnect.
And this is where I think HR does need to play a role, is in helping to translate that disconnect, because there's a mutual beneficial situation where if employers are getting skills that are going to help them outside of their job into the work that they're doing today for the company they're doing today, they will be happier to do it. Like project management skills, that's one of the top skills that's in demand that will help that person grow beyond these walls of this company. And I don't think that executives do a very good job sometimes in articulating why we want you to take this training because we have to get your compliance done, versus we want to take this training because we want you to be set up for success, whether you stay here or go somewhere else. In your career, have there been leaders who you've seen do this especially well? And what is it about them? Is it that they're communicating the value of the program? Is it that they've done the due diligence to build the trust? Like, what is the recipe for success if you're a leader looking to grow capabilities in your business?
The first person that comes to mind, her name is Megan Bowen. She's the CEO of Refine Labs. And she came up with this concept called a talent destination. So no matter who the person is, you want the talent at your organization to be better because they were there. So whatever you have to do to set them up to be better, even in their next job, because they are better off and the company is better off because you helped them. So you want to be a talent destination. You want people to come here and then leave. Nobody's meant to stay anywhere forever. She would even say that to employees. I want you to get better at whatever your job is, and then hopefully you move up here or you move up somewhere else, but you are better because you were here. And so even thinking about it like that, a lot of times employers think of it very much as like a zero sum, like either you're going to do it here or like I'm just going to hoard you in this one position, instead of thinking of it as a bigger picture. Like, why wouldn't you want this person to grow and then move on somewhere else?
It's the family notion.
Hate it.
Why do you hate it?
Even the concept of saying that your employees are your family is the biggest cringe moment I have, because they're not. Like, what is wrong with saying they're a team? What's wrong with team? Why? I'm not your family. People have dysfunctional families, including myself. And so, like, why do I need more members of that?
Right. So there was a leading SaaS company that I worked for, and the CEO dropped a paper basically saying there's 3 times that an employee can leave. It's either too early, it's too late, or it's right on time. And that we are not a family. We're a high-performance sports team. But if you are in a smaller company and you've had a lot of stability, nothing much has changed perhaps, and you've just gone through 5 years of significant change. A pandemic probably changed the way your day-to-day work is happening. You have AI that's now potentially making your job at risk. And so if you're an employee in a company that is stable, steady, maybe a bit old school, has some legacy systems, how can you, if you're an individual employer, how can you start making change? How can you help your company turn into a talent destination?
I think the first part of that is understanding, like, why are people staying in those roles so long? Because is it just because complacency, or is it that they actually want to be there? Because sometimes with all the change that is happening, people feel stuck. And it's like, well, I don't want to change this one thing. This is the one thing that has stayed steady for me, so I'm not going to change it. But I'm also not going to grow. I'm not going to learn anything different. And I'm going to come here, I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to leave. And my thought process to that is, how is that helping the company? Like, if I come in and I'm thinking creatively and I'm coming up with ideas, are you not better off with me than the person that's been here 5 years that has not thought of a new idea in 5 years?
So back to your comment earlier around that return on investment. If you are in a company for 6 months and you're interested in making a big impact, you can do that.
Yes.
Right? And that's doing the same thing 5 years in a row is not 5 years of experience.
No. Just because someone stays doesn't mean that they're actually contributing.
In our last conversation we had off camera a couple of weeks back, you were talking to me about a culture paper, a culture book that you're writing.
Yeah.
This notion of culture is one we've touched on a little bit, HR being a bit of a culture maker, but not necessarily in the tangible ways related to compensation, performance evaluation, who is hired, fired, why. Those are the things that make culture.
Yeah.
Behavioral values. So if you're in an HR role, what does a culture paper look like? How do you actually make it not the fluffy stuff and the stuff that really impacts employee experience and the human experience at work?
Yeah. So the way that I have done that is to think about it as two separate documents. So you have the employer handbook, which is a legal document. It's literally, these are all the things in this state and that state, or that someone has messed up before that we don't want you to ever do again. So think of it that way. This is a legal document. And then the culture playbook is meant to be, I want you to understand what you're getting into. And that is the way that I frame the whole book. If you are a new employee, do you know what it's going to be like to work here? Current state, not this evolutional, like in Neverland, we're going to have all these amazing things and we're going to all be diverse and we're going to all be inclusive. No, what is it actually like to work here today? And if you do have some things that are like your North Star that are aspirational, you can say that this is not what it's currently like, right, but this is what we're aiming to be. And it also holds leadership accountable. But the ability to say what the actual truth is in the current state is where I got the most resistance, if I'm being honest, because people would say, well, we're not sure we want to say that the sales team works all these crazy hours, but do they? So do you want someone to come here and be deceived? Why not tell them? Some people are willing to sign up for things if you just tell them the truth. So it's meant to be the current state of the organization, not all the legal jargon. What is it like to work here? And what are things that could be improved? So we even have a section that says, these are things that we're trying to do better.
It's the truth, right? That transparent accountability. Mm-hmm. Culture is a blend of that aspirational. But to your point around that, like the salespeople working millions of hours, if you're not clear about that, they're going to find out. And the reality is culture is what's happening when no one's watching. So that is the culture within the organization.
Yeah. Like, even if you don't write it down, that doesn't make it not real. And so the resistance to like, we don't want to put this in writing. Why not? Like, this is people's lived experience. And the way that I did it was I actually held focus groups and asked people in every department, what is it like to work there? Because sometimes we think of the whole company as like, this is the company culture. But if you join the marketing team versus the sales team, you might have a very different experience of working at this company.
Very true.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of the systems that HR and talent practitioners and HR ops have put in place to help manage and improve the employee experience. One of them are assessments. There's a variety of these assessments. HR practitioners and organizational psychologists have used these assessments for a long time. There's a number of them. Hogan, Myers-Briggs, Insights, DISC, goes on and on.
Yeah.
Do these work? Are they valuable? How have you used them in your career?
They do work if you're using it as a way to help inform a decision or to think about it from just adding more information. Mm-hmm. But I have seen them used very negatively in a interview situation where you're cutting people out. And if you go and look at a lot of these assessments, there is a lack of DE&I in the way that a lot of them are built. And so if you are neurodivergent or, you are any way different or think differently. And like for me, I am very dyslexic. And so it's things like that that I think a lot of companies don't think about when they're using it to exclude people. So if you're using it to say you did this assessment and so this is why you might not be a fit here, that is wrong. If you're using it to say this is going to give me more context and then how you're going to be a part of the team and all of those things, it can be a value add.
So a blueprint to help us better understand how to work together versus like a pass fail.
Yes.
I've also seen them used to help kind of like make sense of people's personality. How do you feel about that use of it?
Yeah. I personally love these assessments, I must say, like on a personal level.
Yeah.
I will take all the assessments. I want to look at all the horoscopes and I like send them out to my team. My team has done them as like a team ad activity. And every time they're like, oh yeah, this is you. And most of it comes up as like, you know, I'm a commander or like a captain or like all these characteristics. And so I think it just adds context, but I also think of it as very lighthearted. I would never use those assessments to then truly evaluate someone's performance.
I agree with you there. It is, and I too very much love them. They are very much rooted in science. Some of them are better than the others, and they all serve their individual purpose. If you're a C-level executive versus a frontline level manager, you're probably going to want to take a different assessment. But the magic is, to your point, what happens after? How are you using it? Is it informing a development plan? Is it being used to help you create a bridge with somebody in your work that you may just, your personalities yet clash? And this can give you some shared language to be able to recognize that you have a shared goal.
Yes.
I think it's great when it's used like that. You also brought up neurodiversity. Agree, there's some gaps in the research that many of these assessments are built on, and diversity. Generally, I want to talk a little bit about that because it's another area in the world of work where we've seen this huge shift pendulum wise. And I want to get a sense from you around the value of DEI training and what you think about what the future of DEI training is.
So there's so much to be said around DE&I and the current state of what's going on. So obviously in 2020, the pendulum swung to everyone's going to do diversity. We're going to be inclusive. Everyone needs to belong. We're going to set up all these programs. And now the pendulum is swinging back to, maybe we don't want to do that, or maybe we don't want to call it out that we're doing those things. And so a lot of it to me was just a facade. Like you were doing this and it wasn't really baked in to everything that you wanted to do. So my stance is that if D&I is separate from everything else in the business, then it was never going to work. If it was not embedded into everything that you're doing, and I mean everything, then it was never going to work. And if money was not involved in holding people accountable, it was never going to work. And so the companies that have done that, it shows. It is showing in their product. It's showing in the way that they're showing up. It's showing in the ways that they have not dismantled it. And also, if you were able to easily dismantle it, it was also fake. Because how can you dismantle something that was supposed to be part of everything you were doing?
I think what you're calling out is we are delivering DEI training on this day at this time. Everybody get your check mark versus anti-oppressive practices being built in to your hiring, to your performance management, to your leadership development, to the way you do one-on-ones, to every bit and bob in the employee experience.
Exactly.
Have you seen companies? You mentioned that there's some doing it well. Anyone that you want to call out doing it well?
I wouldn't call anyone out by name, but I will say that I have absolutely seen some leaders specifically that have made it a point to make it a part of how they deliver information on their team, how they're building their team, that I absolutely respect. I think organizations sometimes, unfortunately, there's a bad apple, and that bad apple kind of shines a light on some things for one team, maybe that the other team isn't doing. And I actually find this a lot in HR. In most companies I've joined, the HR team is the most diverse, most inclusive, not exclusive, inclusive team versus some other departments. And I always find that fascinating. Like, okay, well, this team is the team that's like hiring people and doing all of these things, and they're representing the values that you want, but no other department is doing this. And that's a call out that I have not figured out yet, but it's happening.
It's making me think of one thing you referenced earlier around, we talked about culture a lot and how culture isn't like the fluffy sparkles, but it is what's happening when no one's watching, who gets hired and fired and why. And this concept of DEI being like a thing you can just easily remove because it's not integrated in anything. Perhaps that's the gap. It's like an exposure of if if we're not making decisions relative to diversity, equity, and inclusion that result in people joining or leaving the organization, that's going to tell you a lot about a culture.
Absolutely. And one of the things I tell my mentees about culture is I say, tell me who are the exceptions to the rules, and I can tell you what the culture is. So you make all these great rules. Who are the people that those rules don't apply to them? These are the exceptions, and then I can tell you what the culture is.
So one thing that I believe is that's a pretty depressing thought. Yeah. It's true though. Like I've seen it. I agree with you. It's true. One thing that I find that is the most underutilized lever that HR has is learning.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about how learning can help an HR team who's doing all this stuff themselves. How can it help them proliferate that in their org? What's the role of learning within an HR team?
So this has come up before where actually the learning and development team was separate than like the people team. And I don't agree with that. I think it should sit with the people team. I think it should be someone's role. So it should not be like, oh, you're an HR business partner. Oh, and by the way, this team needs to be learning about change management. Good luck with that. Because it's not setting up the HR partner to succeed if that's not actually all that they're going to be doing. Because a lot of times that's the very bottom of their list. Mm-hmm. The top is employee relations, you know what I mean? All the things that are on fire. And then it is treated as like, oh, I need you to do this thing. It's like compliance related instead of actually being a part of the narrative. So it needs to be someone's full-time job. And then that person is partnering with the HR business partners, whether that's training them, it's training the leaders to make sure that they're getting the information that they need. But when you just say, add it on to another thing, it's never going to be successful.
It's a partnership model, yes. Right? Partner with your HRBP, understand the rhythm, the attrition, the retention, the skills gap. Partner with the leader, understand what are the business drivers they need to close. And then the learning person helps to bridge that gap, make sure the right programs are in place at the right time. And whether that's within HR or in a federated model outside of HR, but still very tightly partnering, I think both of those things can be successful. Well, Jessica, I suspect in 5 years or so, we'll be able to come back and have a conversation about HR, about the future of work, about DEI, performance management, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. If there was one thing that you wanted to be true about the talent organizations of the future, mm-hmm. What is it?
I think, and this one is like professional and personal at the same time, I think if we can make employers, employees, and everyone realize that your work is not your worth, you are so much more than your job, and your job can enhance your personal life. So there's no reason how we talked about project management. If you're learning project management at work, it's going to help you in your personal life. So even just knowing that, and that's been a hard lesson for me to learn, is that my worth is so much more than my job and my title and all of these things. And so I would just leave with that, like you're more than your job.
So beautifully said. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm so happy you're able to be here.
This was fun. Thank you so much.